Today, let's talk about the remaining two categories of attributes, God's personal and moral attributes. And these are those that we human beings can at least partially identify with, such as personality, freedom, and love. First of all, God is incomparably personal. Although he is much more than we can signify by the term personal, God is certainly not less than a personal being. He speaks, he communicates, and when he does, he uses the word I to describe himself. God has a personal awareness. Not only that, he also has a name. And so he is not a nameless energy or an abstract idea or a thing. God is not an it, he is an I. He's a person, not a thing. And so he cannot be thought of without using personal terms. Now, this idea has helped Christianity distinguish itself from other schools of thought, such as pantheism, which is the view that God is the world, that there is no difference between God and creation. It's all one thing, one entity. Polytheism is the view that there are multiple gods, which plays on the analogy of human personality and divine personality, that different gods have different personalities and limitations, just like humans do. It also separates us from the view called agnosticism, which is a view that no one can know the divine, even if such a person existed. It just wouldn't be possible to know that person. And then atheism, the view that no eternal personal being exists at all. But let's also talk about the divine goodness of God. There are many moral characteristics that we could ascribe to God: justice, righteousness, truthfulness. But two that typically stand out are holy and love. To say that God is holy is nothing other than to say that God is perfect in goodness, which is exactly how Jesus describes him in the Sermon on the Mount when he tells us to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Holiness conveys this idea of being set apart or separate from all that is unworthy of God. Therefore, by definition, God is holy. He is perfectly distinct from corruption. Not only that, God's character never changes. It's called immutability. James 1:17, a verse that we're all familiar with, at least part of it, it says that every good and perfect gift comes from God. But James goes on to say, and he never changes or casts shifting shadows. God is never different than who he is. His character remains the same throughout eternity. Not only is God completely good in himself, he also wants to share that goodness with his creation. This is called the divine benevolence. God wants his creatures to be happy, and he desires to bestow upon them all of the goodness that we are capable of receiving. He does this because he loves us. In fact, God is love, as 1 John 4:16 tells us. It is impossible to speak of Christian teaching without speaking of God's eternal love. Now, Odin reminds us that among all of the themes of Christian doctrine, among all of the theological avenues that we can explore, that none is more capable of eliciting what Odin calls theological delight than the study of divine perfections, the study of God's eternal nature and his goodness to us. And so as we wrap up this way too short, brief summary of part 1 of Odin's book, I trust you'll agree with him when he says that it is a joyful act to study the eternal joy. Thanks for watching. I would love your help building up the TCB community, so please share my videos like this one on your social media platforms, and be sure to sign up for our email list for more great content.